What is going on, everyone? So a couple of months ago, I asked for you guys to give me some unpopular Walking Dead opinions. I wanted to hear what you guys have to say, and today we're going to be actually reacting to some of these unpopular opinions. I'm going to be talking about how I feel about them and whether I agree or disagree, and just adding any sort of input I have on them. So the first one here is coming from Rowanak, and I apologize if any of these names I can't say correctly. Please correct me in the comments if you can. Carl's death was one of the most necessary things in The Walking Dead. This is a huge one to start off with. This is an absolute massive hot take that so many people disagree with, but I honestly kind of agree. I'm not gonna say it's necessary, but I do think that it did work, and the way they managed to play it off actually helped out the story quite a bit. Specifically in terms of Rick keeping Negan alive, I think it added a lot more emotion to that. It also made it make a lot more sense, and I also think it kind of built and made Rick and Michonne's relationship even stronger. Like, I think they could have obviously still had just the same, sort of relationship even if Carl didn't die, but I think that death really did build the relationship to be way stronger than it probably would have been otherwise, and it added a lot of emotion to that relationship. So I personally enjoyed how they handled this death, even if at first I wasn't happy about it. At first I was like, oh no, Carl's got all these amazing comic storylines that come later on in the story, but they easily replaced those stories with Judith and obviously with Henry as well. So honestly, I was okay with it. I'm not going to use the word necessary for it, but I definitely think it worked out just fine. Next hot take is coming from Fur2627. Last Day on Earth is an amazing episode. People hate on it because of the cliffhanger, but even with that ending, it's one of the best episodes in the show. I 1000% agree. I put this as one of the most underrated episodes of the entire show, and I agree 1000%. It is amazing, and yes, people really only hate on it because of the cliffhanger ending, but even with that ending, it is one of the best episodes in the show. The actual build up to Negan's reveal and everything that came with that was just masterful. It was some of the most beautiful storytelling in the entire Walking Dead, and the actual tension buildup was fantastic. Up next, we got a hot take from Amy K. Early Walking Dead was fantastic, but it suffered from a not knowing when to end. If the showrunners had gone in knowing the ending up front and built their story in a concise and meaningful experience with a clear beginning, middle, and end, it could have been one of the most epic, action-packed, and well-written stories on television. I feel like overall, I'm always going to agree that it is best if the actual creators of any sort of story know the ending beforehand. That usually doesn't happen. I'm pretty sure even Breaking Bad with Vince Gilligan, the ending wasn't 100% set in stone when he started it. So like, even some of the best shows of all time, sometimes they don't know the ending, and sometimes they kind of create that ending as they go. But I do think it is the best when they do have a specific vision in mind for how it's going to end. And obviously The Walking Dead has gone through a lot of different showrunners, so it was changing quite a bit. I don't think what Frank Darabont wanted for the show was the exact same as what Glenn Mazzarata, what was his name, the showrunner from season 3, whoever the showrunner of season 3 was. I think it was Glenn Mazzarata or something. I forget how you pronounce his last name. But of course, his ending of the show was probably very different. Like, they all have different ideas of what the direction of the show is going to be. And so I understand what's being said there. That makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I also think the comics there were basically a baseline for how the show was going to go. And it was more so up to the showrunners of how much of the comics they actually want to follow. Do they want to follow how the comics ends? And they actually kind of did. They ended it around the same point the comics did with the Commonwealth story, but with some extra flair on top of it with all these spin-offs, which obviously there's not in the comics. So I get what's being said here. Partially I agree, but on the other hand, I don't know. It really just depends. I think most shows are probably going to have that problem. If you have something that goes on for that long, it's going to be hard to know a clear ending way before you even get there. I will say the showrunners and writers do a great job of making things work even if they didn't originally plan it. There's so many things that happen in this show that you can tell was not planned. It was just something that they thought, oh, that would actually work out well, and then they just do it. Like, Daryl's character is a great example because he was originally not meant to be a big character at all, but people loved him so much, so they kept him around. Like, stuff like that happens quite frequently. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of other crazy things that happen in the story that was not planned originally, and as they get to that point, they're just like, oh, you know what, that might actually work, let's do it. And sometimes it ends up playing, it ends up working out, it ends up being actually really cool and interesting, but sometimes It also doesn't. Next hot take is coming from Hammy Woods. Not only was Glenn's death necessary, but it didn't ruin the show at all. Glenn peaked in season 4, not sorry. His importance fizzled out in season 5 and resurged with his conflict with Nicholas, but after that I was totally okay with him being gone. Also, his BS dumpster death was so shocking, I loved it. Even though I knew he died at the lineup, my jaw was still on the floor. I don't get the hate behind it. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think most people probably do agree that his death was necessary and actually did work out quite well. It's just people love the character so much that they just couldn't get over the fact that that character was being killed off, which is completely fair. I was the same way. I was a wreck when it happened, right? It was a really emotional episode, but yeah, I wanted it to happen because it worked so well and it ended up being one of the best moments in television history because of how shocking it was. You know, I think people just view fiction differently. Some people view it in a way where they want it to be where all their favorite characters survive to the end. They don't want them to ever be in harm. They want them to always win. Whereas other people view it in a way where they just want the most entertaining and best possible story to come from the show. And that I'm one of those people. Like, I don't mind when my favorite characters get killed off as long as it makes sense for the story and is actually well written. I love Glenn. I don't agree here that Glenn's, you know, peaked in season 4 and his story fizzled out. I think he was always interesting even up until his death. But I do think that, you know, that doesn't mean that I don't want it to happen. I still want it to happen. And I think, like you said, it was such an incredible death. And I think his dumpster thing, I don't know, part of me liked it, but also part of me doesn't like it. I think it might have been not a good idea to mislead your audience like that. I think they only did it to kind of like prepare us for his actual death in season 7. But yeah, looking back on it, maybe they shouldn't have done it. Probably, but I don't know. I was always kind of 50-50 on it. I kind of liked part of it, and then I also didn't like another part of it. Next hot take comes from Sasquatch212. If Frank Darabont had been allowed to continue as showrunner, we almost certainly would have ended up with a significantly better show. He had a clear vision of what he wanted to do. He never actually had the chance to get into the meat of the story. All we really saw from his version of the show was the foundations and setup, a proof of concept. He had written and directed the screenplays for The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, two of the best book-to-screen adaptations ever. Also, seems like the majority of the actors who worked with him agree the show would have been better in his hands. The Frank Darabont drama is some of the most interesting stuff for The Walking Dead because I do agree he is a fantastic writer and director. Yes, The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile are some of my favorite movies of all time. And also, The Mist is also pretty solid. Like, he does a great job with those movies. And he is all around a solid director and writer, right? But I also don't think, like, season 1 was my favorite, even by a long shot. Like, I think season 1 is one of my least favorite seasons, to be honest. It still is solid. It still is a solid build-up and foundation for the show. But the thing is I really have no idea what direction he was going to take the show in. So it's really hard to, you know, predict that. Yeah, I'm sure it would have been good. But would it have had the same highs as The Walking Dead? Here's my prediction. This is off my head. It's not really something that I have like pure evidence of, but I do have a feeling that if Frank Darabont was the showrunner who continued all throughout the show, I do think the show would not have had the same level of success as The Walking Dead. I don't think it would raise, you know, 7 million viewers for the season 7 premiere. Like, I don't think it would get to those heights. And I also don't think it would have lasted 11 seasons. It wouldn't have gotten any spinoffs. It probably would have been like a 6-season television show. It probably would have ended around Alexandria, sometime like around there. It would have had a clear-cut ending, and it would have only been a certain amount of seasons. And I don't think it would have been this global phenomenon that it became in like season 3 and 4 when it like blew up. Because at that point, the views were getting higher and higher and higher. It was a pretty popular show before that, don't get me wrong. Seasons 2 and 3, those were popular seasons. But like it really became huge, like end of season 3, into season 4, and then 5. Like those were the huge seasons. And then obviously it just kind of dropped off in season 7. But I think it never would have gotten to those heights. But I also don't think it would have ever gotten to a point where people would be calling the show filler or like really criticizing it for being awful. I think it would have been one of those like hidden gem shows where a lot of people love and enjoy, but like not many people care about it at the same time. So that's just a random opinion I have that I really do feel like probably would have been the case. Like, yes, he made incredible movies, but at the same time, I don't think that like necessarily confirms that he would have done a great job with the rest of the show. I think maybe he would have. Like I said, I really don't know. Would it have been better? I don't know. It's hard to say, but I definitely would be curious to see that alternate version of the show where he did continue it. and that's just what it was. You know, I would have been curious to see it for sure. But I also love what we got, so I'm not really mad that we got what we got, because I do love the show. Next hot take comes from Mark G. Andrea should have lived, and she doesn't deserve the hate she gets. She just didn't want anyone to die. Yeah, I've always said Andrea doesn't really deserve the hate she gets. I feel like she was always just a character that got people hated because she sided with the villain, but like she didn't really side with the governor. She genuinely was in a position where she did not want to see Woodbury, you know, be destroyed. Like she got to a point where she just wanted them to just, you know, have peace, and she knew that she kind of had to be on the governor's side in order to make that work. And it didn't work out in her favor, obviously, but she did end up, you know, being a pretty good character. I did enjoy what she went through in those episodes, but at the same time, I'm actually glad they killed her off there, because her version of Andrea was nothing like the comic version, to the point where I would never want to see Rick and Andrea get together with their show versions anyways. So I'm okay that Andrea didn't survive. I'm actually happy that she ended up dying at that point. But at the same time, I do agree here that she is a decent character. She is enjoyable. I don't think she deserves a lot of the hate she gets, but I also think her death worked out just fine and actually made for a really emotional moment in season 3. The next hot take comes from Maxwell. It is just too repetitive for my taste. A group is on the road looking for a safe place. Group finds a seemingly safe place. Safe place inevitably goes to shit. Group is on the road again. Never any sort of resolution, climax in sight. Rinse and repeat forever. Interspersed with nostalgic, if only we'd appreciate our pre-apocalyptic life more, sob stories. I'm gonna be honest, this is one of the most like common takes about The Walking Dead I've seen over the years. It's usually someone who stopped watching around like season 4 or 5. No hate to Maxwell here. He or she is allowed to have that opinion, but I can't disagree with it more. It's one of those takes that just like, oh, it's just, to me, this is a very like surface level opinion to have, because it's like you can simplify any story to this degree. You can look at any movie and be like, oh, all comic book movies are just, you know, heroes versus villains and heroes win in the end. Like you can say that about anything and make it sound so simplified, when in actuality that's not what's actually going on. You could say, oh, all romances are just, oh, it's just, you know, two couples, they fight and then they get back together by the end. Like again, you're just simplifying it to such a large degree. I don't think the show is as simplified as group looking for safe place, they find safe place, it goes to shit, and then they're on the road, and then they find a safe place again. Like I don't feel like the show is actually like that at all. And actually, when you really think about it, the safe place they find in season 5 is the place they stay for the rest of the show. So they actually find one singular safe place that they stay at for the rest of the show only like halfway through the show, actually even less than halfway through the show. So I don't really think that's how the show really works. Maybe for the first couple seasons, but even then, the situations revolving around it are vastly different. Like you're not dealing with the same exact places, you're not dealing with the same exact conflicts, and you're also not dealing with the same characters. And even the characters that are the same are dealing with very different character arcs. They go through all sorts of character arcs, and they're very different from season to season. So I don't know, I just feel like I said, surface level kind of viewpoint of the show, I feel like it's a lot deeper than that. And yeah, I mean, if it's repetitive for some people, that's fine, I get it. But at the same time, it's like, I just feel like you can say that about anything. You know, you could say anything's too simplified. People be saying that about all shows, and it's just like, I don't know, man. Like, that's just not how it is. I could say Breaking Bad is just, oh, it's just this guy who becomes a meth cook because he has cancer. That's all. Like, it's just the way you say it just can make it sound so much more simple than it actually is. But no, it's actually a much deeper show than that. And I feel like The Walking Dead is pretty deep as well. This next take comes from Abdul Rosita. Is that Rosita? Rosita? I'm not sure. Negan doesn't deserve a redemption arc, and even the arc that he got was kind of pointless. So this one's kind of hard to talk about, because I feel like it's one of those fiction versus real life things. Because if this was a real character, yeah, I would agree. Like I'm not gonna want this type of person to be redeemed. I don't want to see someone who murdered someone like that with a baseball bat to get redeemed. I don't think that's, you know, I would want that person to be in prison for the rest of their life, right? But when we're talking about fiction, like this is a fictional character, I actually think giving him a redemption arc is actually really interesting and complex, and actually makes the character work a lot better. Now, is his redemption arc perfect? No, I actually think there's a lot of issues with it. I think actually the comic arc is probably better, There are a lot of parts of the redemption arc in the show I do like. I like everything they did with him in season 9 especially. Season 10 started to get a little muddy. I hated the whole thing where they tried to make us think that he was like working with the Whisperers, and honestly, he just took way too long to kill Alpha. I feel like he probably should have found a way to do that sooner. There were so many times where he was with Alpha in the woods alone. He probably could have done something. I know he ends up, deciding to do it later because he knew Lydia was in a safe place, so she wouldn't have been harmed. But like, even before that, I don't know. I feel like he could have done something before Alpha attacked Hilltop. So they did stuff like that. And then in season 11, it got really annoying. Like, especially when they allowed Negan to let Maggie die. I mean, she didn't die, obviously, but he was going to let her die. I was like, that's not what Negan should do if you want to give him a redemption arc. That doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. And I also don't like how sometimes they have Negan try to, like, justify himself. Like, I think it works better if he's just remorseful. Like, he just feels like, I shouldn't have done that. I had a reason for it back in the day, and it makes sense, but, like, I understand I did something terrible. Like, that would make the redemption arc work a bit better, but I do feel like them constantly making him go like, oh yeah, I would do it again. Like, it's just, I don't know, man, it's a bit much. I get what he's trying to say, but I feel like sometimes they go too far with it with Maggie, because then it makes the redemption a little less realistic. But I do disagree with this overall take, because I do think his character does deserve a redemption arc. I just, again, separating him from, he's a fictional character, so it's obviously different than if he was a real person. And I don't think the arc was pointless, because I do think it adds a lot to his character in terms of, again, showing a different side of him, showing the complex side of him. I think the Here's Negan episode did a great job of showing how complex Negan could actually be. But like I said, some other episodes just didn't do as good of a job with it. Next take here we have from Marvel DC Extinction Wrestler. That's a very interesting username. Lori is not unlikable and is actually one of the best characters in the show. So I agree with the first point. I do think she's definitely not unlikable. I don't think she's nearly as unlikable as people say, but I don't think she's one of the best characters in the show. Like, I wouldn't put her top 20 even, maybe top 30, maybe, I don't know, but she's not like that great of a character, but she's definitely not unlikable. I think a lot of people who say that, I mean, she's obviously in some moments antagonistic towards Rick, the main character. So when we're viewing the show and you view a character who's showing any sorts of resentment or challenge to the main character, fans are kind of conditioned to have problems with that character. It happened in Breaking Bad, which, don't even get me started on the hate for Skylar White in Breaking Bad. That hate is ridiculous. That hate is the most forced hate I've ever heard in my entire life. But it's the same thing. It's like when there's another character that has any sort of resentment or challenge presented to the main character, people hate that character. And it's really dumb. It doesn't make any sense, because if you actually look at who these characters are, it makes sense why she does what she does. And same with Lori. I mean, like, yes, should Lori have slept with Shane? No. But does that make her this awful, unlikable person? Not really. I mean, she thought Rick was dead. She was definitely doing something she shouldn't have been doing, but I mean, that's part of what makes the character interesting. She has flaws. That's kind of what makes it work. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people have this idea where characters have to be perfect and no flaws. No, that would be boring. We want flawed characters. That makes it interesting. So I think Lori is a likable character. I do enjoy her, but I wouldn't say she's one of the best in the show. Up next, we have two takes coming from Ginny's Jong Hobear. I don't think I'm saying that right. I apologize. I don't know if this counts, but I have a couple. Dale's character in the TV show didn't bring anything to the show except for people to have boring conflict with. Damn. I think he was too old-fashioned, wasn't great with dealing how life had changed, and honestly, his interference, especially with Andrea, annoyed me. But here's the interesting thing. That last sentence you said is what makes him a good character and what proves that he did bring something to the show. Like, that to me, you kind of proved why he actually was a good character there. I think the fact that he wasn't great at dealing with how life has changed is what made him so interesting. He stuck on to having hope. He stuck on to thinking that they can work things out and make things work, even with someone who was part of a group that was attacking Rick. Like, he didn't want anyone to die. He kind of is what Andrea became in season 3. He wanted to keep everyone together. He didn't want to split people up. I actually appreciated that character. He did have a lot of interference with Andrea and what what she was trying to do, but it made sense. I mean, he cares about her a lot. He didn't want her to kill herself, obviously. Why would he want that? And yeah, he's gonna do anything he can to stop that, regardless of if it's his choice or not. He's gonna try to stop it. I don't blame him for that. So I don't know, I always liked Dale. I think he's a really innocent character who just, yeah, he was having trouble trying to deal with how the world changed, but again, that's what made him interesting to me. So I do disagree there, but respect your opinion nonetheless. They also say, I also didn't really care about Glenn and felt his death was actually a great part of the show. He was an alright character, but I don't know. I tended to forget he was there. His relationship with Maggie was too much of his entire personality. Honestly, he mostly just felt like a stepping stone for Maggie's growth. And the only reason I felt his death sad was how it affected the other characters. I mean, I always loved Glenn, but I do agree a big part of his character was his relationship with Maggie. But on the flip side, I also feel like that was also a big part of Maggie's character. They kind of worked off each other quite a bit, and I thought that was interesting. That was an interesting way to deal with those characters. But I do agree his death was great, so I mean, I'll give you that. I definitely enjoyed his death and how that was handled. We got another take here from Sasquatch. Rick's ending in the show is incredibly boring and underwhelming. His comic book ending is so much better in every way, like what it means for the world after his death, his legacy, and to Carl. Also the fact that after all he's been through, he's just killed in bed by Sebastian, just brilliant. Around season 4, Andrew Lincoln was asked how he wanted Rick's stories to end, and he thought it'd be great if he was killed by a kid, and years later that's exactly what happened in the books. Rick's show ending is just so uninteresting, and it feels like it's pandering to the section of the fan base who just refuses to have the characters die. Very interesting points brought up here, actually insanely interesting points. I will say though, I don't think we actually have Rick's full ending yet. I do think he's going to return for something else in the future. Of course, that's not confirmed at this point. It's kind of just up in the air, but let's say that is his ending. Let's say the Ones Who Live ending is Rick's ending. Is it a boring and underwhelming ending? I don't think it's boring. I think how they ended CRM was boring, and I do think if they don't have Rick reunite with other characters, then I would agree it's kind of underwhelming as an ending. But obviously, I do think him reuniting with Judith and RJ was good. But would I have preferred him to get killed? No. I mean, here's the thing. If Rick never left the show and he was always in it up until season 11, and then they did kill him off in season 11 by Sebastian, I might have enjoyed that ending, possibly, but since he left in season 9 and we were all excited for his return in the Ones Who Live show, I would absolutely hate it if they decided to kill him off in the Ones Who Live. That to me just wouldn't have worked at all. And honestly, at this point, he's been, dead to the main characters for so long that killing him off at all, I think would be kind of stupid. So I do think it could have worked if he just stayed in the show. But the fact that he didn't stay in the show, I don't want that to happen anymore. I actually think that wouldn't work at all. And I'm to the point where, yeah, I actually want them to give him a satisfying ending where he is with his family. I just want to see a little bit more of him in terms of, reuniting with some other characters like Daryl and Carol and Morgan, even Negan. Just seeing those characters, I think, would be really interesting. But I don't think I want him to die. But I get what you're saying. I do think him being killed by Sebastian. In the comics, I don't think it worked exactly. But I do like what you have to say about the end here, that, there's certain audience members who just refuse to have certain characters die. And there is a large portion of the fan base that is that way. I mean, that happened with Glenn's death. They just refused to accept that Glenn was going to die and immediately got pissed off about it. But I do kind of agree. Sometimes characters have to die, and sometimes it actually makes the story better and more interesting. But just for this specific situation, I don't think killing him off would have worked. Next up, we have an unpopular opinion from Fulcrum. I think killing off Carl was a good decision. I like Carl in the first few seasons, but as soon as he arrived in Alexandria, he just became annoying. All the unrealistic teenage drama, and he didn't have much to do. The eye thing was cool though. Then suddenly his character does a 180 and goes from Massacre All the Saviors to Season 6 Peaceful Morgan. His death really did a lot for the development of Rick and Michonne, and I like the idea of him dying from a walker bite. It just gave the show its credibility back because in Season 7 and 8, the walkers weren't important anymore. So obviously we just talked about this a little bit, and I mean, I agree that killing him off was something that worked. Like I said, do I think it was necessary? Not really, but do I think it worked? Yes. Am I going to say it was a good decision? I don't know. I think it was kind of neither a good nor a bad decision. It was just kind of something that ended up working, and I was fine with it. But in terms of the opinions here about his character doing a 180, I actually think that change in Carl makes more sense than people realize, because I feel like there's a lot of subtext to it, and you kind of have to read into it. You can't just, they don't kind of just tell you, like Carl doesn't outright say, I am changing, but you can kind of see it, because what happens is he was really pissed at Negan and he wanted to kill him, right? He was dead set on that. But what happens? He goes to the sanctuary, he goes shooting up a bunch of saviors, and he's ready to kill Negan. He wasn't really going to try to massacre all the saviors, because you mentioned here that he goes from massacring all the saviors to season 6 people of Morgan. Those are two extremes that aren't really true, because he was never trying to massacre all the saviors. He went to the sanctuary to kill Negan. He ended up having to kill a couple of saviors just by the nature of, you know, them being there, but he didn't want to kill any saviors. He just wanted to kill Negan.
I only want Negan. He killed my friends. No one else needs to die.
When he gets there, he notices that this factory, this sanctuary, is actually a lot of just normal people. There's not all these evil saviors. A lot of them are just like workers and families and a bunch of people inside of the actual sanctuary itself. So Carl learns a lot after going there, right? So what happens later on in the show? Well, he starts to realize, I don't think a war is a good idea. He starts to realize that if we actually do a big war against the saviors, not only will people on our side die, but also the innocent people at the sanctuary will die. That was Carl's whole point in season 8. Carl never turned into season 6 Peaceful Morgan. Season 6 Peaceful Morgan was killing is never the answer. You know, Morgan was all about, no, killing is always bad. That's basically what he was, right? And then he ended up having to, you know, get rid of that philosophy at some point, or at least try to change it up a little bit, because he realized it doesn't really work all the time, especially in self-defense cases. But Carl never got to that point. Carl was more so just under the impression that maybe killing Negan isn't a good idea, because you're not going to fix the problems with, you know, the war here. You actually might make things worse. You might make a lot of those workers in the sanctuary pick up guns themselves and become soldiers, because that's how people get radicalized. They get radicalized by, you know, other people dying around them, and especially people they look up to. So if they go in there and just slaughter a bunch of saviors and kill Negan, well, what's going to happen? All those workers are probably going to start to fight against them, and then there's never going to be peace. Carl just wanted peace. Carl was kind of like Andrea from season 3, if we're going to be honest. He just wanted peace, and he thought trying to work with Negan might be a way to get peace, possibly, right? He wanted that, and I think that made sense. I think the 180 kind of made sense. It wasn't like a full 180 necessarily, but it was enough of a turn from him wanting to kill Negan to not, because he realized that there is a possibility for peace, and we should try to strive for it as much as possible. So I think that actual change in Carl's story makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people kind of miss out on that because they're not reading into the subtext. No offense to you though, a lot of people do that, but I don't know. I personally have seen the subtext there. I feel like you can kind of notice it just by Carl's facial expressions, even just how he changes after that moment. So I don't know, just something to think about. The last resident here says that World Beyond is a great show. Season 1, while being a bit slow, did great in terms of expanding the world of The Walking Dead, as well as having an intriguing plot and its own unique style, unlike anything else in the universe. Season 2 was a genuine great season that made the serum feel huge, like a huge threat, and concluded each character in a way that felt fitting to how they were set up in season 1. Overall, World Beyond is a great show that I believe if more people would have watched both seasons till the end, would have been a lot more liked than it was. I respect the opinion, but I disagree. I've given my opinions on World Beyond before. I really don't like this show. I think it has a lot of potential, and I do agree that the serum stuff was interesting, intriguing. I do like the serum stuff there, but I think the characters, the core characters, were just so uninteresting, and a lot of the writing and the dialogue just did not work for me at all. I'm glad it worked for others. I'm really glad it did, but I was just so disinterested in a lot of the show because of it. I think there's some messy storylines in there as well, a lot of convoluted storylines, kind of like some Fear the Walking Dead type stuff, where I feel like some stuff was just really handled in a clunky way. And I feel like, yes, there was threats there with the serum, but they felt more cartoonish than like an actual grounded villainous group like I feel like they do in The Ones Who Live. You know, I felt like they weren't what they could have been. They weren't to their full potential. So I don't know. I personally wasn't a huge fan of the show, but season 2 was definitely a lot better than season 1. I would call season 2 of the World Beyond show, you know, okay, maybe just a little bit below average, but season 1 was genuinely just pretty bad in my opinion. So that's just my take, of course, but I'm very glad you were able to enjoy it. Next, we have a hot take from Bathtub Barracuda. These are some really interesting usernames today. No Sanctuary ended up hurting the franchise because it started the trend of making our survivors OP and could not be harmed when in danger. This becomes a much larger issue in season 8. I mean, I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying, but I don't really think that's more of like a No Sanctuary problem. That's just like general something that happens in a lot of shows. Obviously, this centers around the topic of plot armor. Everyone always talks about plot armor. For me, plot armor is not necessarily always a bad thing. To me, it's only a bad thing when an unrealistic scenario is created in order to get someone out of a situation. That is what I don't like. But if there's some sort of plot armor where something very unlikely happens, but it's still realistic, then I'm fine with it. And that's kind of what happened here in No Sanctuary. Like, I wouldn't call it unrealistic. It was just very, very like good timing. Like Carol's timing on, you know, starting that explosion was pretty much perfect because she was able to save Glenn's life just by, you know, shooting off that shot at the right time. Like, it was very close timing, obviously, very unlikely for that to happen that way, but it still could happen. It's not like it's unrealistic. Now, if, you know, Carol did some 360 no scope with the sniper and somehow, you know, hit a shot through like 20 different walls, and it somehow, like, you know, I don't know, like if there was some bullshit like that where it just seemed really stupid, like what does that even mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's the way someone's life is saved, like, yeah, I would agree that's stupid. Why even write that in the first place? But I don't think No Sanctuary had a problem in terms of that, because no one was really like in a situation where you were like, oh, they should have died there. No, because I mean, it was just a really good timing, and that was really the only time where it was really good timing, was that one instance. And I think the reason they didn't have anyone die in that situation is because then the next episode wouldn't have that sort of like almost peaceful feeling leading up until Bob's death, right? I feel like Bob's death was so impactful because it came after a moment where they were all kind of peacefully eating in the church and kind of just enjoying their time. And that probably wouldn't have happened if someone died previously in No Sanctuary. So I don't know. I personally am okay with how that played out. And yeah, in season 8, sure, you can point at a couple moments where a character probably should have died in a certain instance, but I don't know. I feel like most shows and movies have that, and it's more of a situation of how the director shot the scene and choreographed it as opposed to how it's written. Next up, we have a take coming from CJ's Bomb. Season 7 and 8 are way better than season 9 and 10. So here's the thing. I can't really definitively say this because, I mean, I'm kind of mixed between these seasons. Like, I don't think either grouping of seasons is better than the other. Because for me, season 9 is the best out of these 4 seasons, and then season 7 is the worst. And then season 8 and 10 are just kind of in the middle. Like, I would rank them season 9, then season 8, then season 10, then season 7. I guess that would mean I like 9 and 10 more, but I feel like I wouldn't say that though, because I like 8 a lot more than 10. I don't know, to be honest. I can't really say if I agree or disagree with this. I don't know. But I appreciate the opinion though, because I feel like a lot of people do hate on season 7 and 8 more than it probably deserves. So, I mean, I can't disagree, but I also can't really agree. TV show Governor is not an intimidating villain. Comic Governor is 1,000 times better. TV Governor is just Lotso from Toy Story 3. I've seen that comparison so many times. I love the TV show Governor, I do, but Comic Governor is very, very good as well. I don't really know if I prefer one or the other. I think they work in their own right. They are very different. I think a lot of people who haven't read the comics don't know that, but yeah, Comic Governor is very different. He was a lot more brutal. He did some just disgusting stuff. I mean, obviously the TV Governor did some awful stuff too, but it doesn't even compare to what Comic Governor does. Like, just look it up. Believe me, it's some messed up stuff that he does, especially to Michonne. It's terrible, but I don't know. They're both well-written characters. It's just, I don't know. I just think David Morrissey just did such a fantastic job with the TV Governor that I can't say he was not intimidating. I think he is intimidating. Is he similar to Lotso from Toy Story 3? Sure, but I don't think it's really a bad thing because Lotso from Toy Story 3 is also a fantastic villain. So I don't know. I don't really agree, but I don't really disagree either. And this one's coming from Sasquatch. I think I forgot to mention who wrote this hot take. Sasquatch is giving us a lot of hot takes today, so I appreciate that. Next hot take is coming from Tihas Spalletti. Tihas Spalletti. Again, if I'm saying these names wrong, let me know in the comments. Invincible is a vastly superior show to The Walking Dead because the passion that's being put into Invincible was only applied to season 1 of The Walking Dead. After that, season 2 and 3 were consistently good, but before the show fell victim to filler and set episode counts. Still very good though, overall. Well, I mean, I love Invincible, I do, but I also love The Walking Dead. I don't know. I think seasons 4 through 6 are actually better than 1 through 3. So I wouldn't even say that like it's just season 2 and 3 that are like, or seasons 1 through 3 that are good. I really do think 4 through 6 has some of the highest highs of the show ever. Are there some low points? Yeah. Are there some filler points? Yeah. And I think set episode counts was a problem, but does that ruin the whole show? No, because there are some incredible moments and incredible episodes that I think I wouldn't want any other way. Up next, we have a take from Lou Comics. After Glenn's death, the show only goes downhill. A lot of people have this take. I don't even think it's an unpopular opinion at this point. I feel like a lot of people have this take, but I mean, I disagree, obviously. I don't like the word downhill because I feel like there's very rare instances with shows where it's just like a straight downhill. You know what I mean? Like it's never just, oh, the show's good and good, and then it's a downhill. For me, it's more of a roller coaster. Like The Walking Dead has been, okay, this point's really good, this point's not so good, this point's good, this point. It goes up and down quite a bit, whether it's season by season or half season by half season or even episode by episode. Because, you know, after Glenn's death, even just the episode after Glenn's death, I loved. I think The Well is a really good episode. That was the, you know, introduction to the kingdom. I thought that was a really good episode. Then you have a couple episodes that aren't that great, but then you have a couple of amazing episodes with Negan, and then you have the, you know, episode 8 of season 7 where Spencer dies. It's an incredible episode. And then a lot of All Out War is really incredible too. And then you have season 9 with the Whispers. A lot of that's incredible. Like there's some great stuff throughout the whole show, and I think that includes after Glenn's death. But I know a lot of people disagree. A lot of people thought everything after that sucked, and I don't know. I just don't really agree. And that is going to do it for this video. Let me know some of your hot takes in the comment section down below, and what do you think about these hot takes? I would love to hear what you guys think. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Peace out, everyone.